charges laid today. Let's speak to Joel Rubin, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs in the Obama administration. Joel Rubin, welcome here to the programme.
It's great to be with you.
Just how important a moment do you think this is, the laying of articles of impeachment?
So it's a critical moment in the process, and when the House votes on these articles likely next week, it will be a new moment and a real inflection point for American politics, because Republicans in the Senate are going to have to look themselves in the eye and the American people and explain why the president's behavior is permissible. And up till now, they've offered a lot of excuses, but not a lot of credible arguments. And so it's a really critical moment right now for our democracy.
I'll come back to political tactics in a moment, but there are two articles laid: abuse of power for personal gain and obstruction. Which, on your view, is the stronger?
Well, the obstruction is clear as day, and that one should not get much of an argument because, frankly, the president has failed to provide documents. He's tried to block witnesses from testifying. We've had 17 U.S. government officials testify despite the president's attempts to prevent that from happening, and he also has blocked any document release. So that's an easy one. As far as abuse of power, the argument that the Democrats have made that the president used his office to pressure Ukraine to help him win in 2020, that's an argument that is strong and it resonates amongst Democrats, but for Republicans, that's one where they tend to gaslight and confuse and create a distraction theory about Russia not being the one that interfered, but Ukraine in 2016. So that's a little harder, but certainly Democrats are going to stay unified, at least in the House, on that.
Well, you touched on the tactics I wanted to talk about, because from the Republicans at different stages we've had denial, we've had muddying the waters with talk about corruption and election meddling, we've had complaints about being excluded from the process, then boycotting the process when they were invited to come in. In terms of those tactics, do you expect those to continue in the Senate, or would you expect something different? It's interesting, the White House spokesman saying in the last little while that Donald Trump will address these false impeachment charges in that trial and expects full exoneration. So it is possible the president himself might appear.
Doubtful. This president always promises that he's going to come clean at some point and then never does. So it's highly doubtful that he's going to be providing the documents that are, for example, in the Office of Management and Budget that lay out the exact legitimate case for the withholding of aid to Ukraine. Why? Because there are no documents. And so the president, he's going to continue to make this argument for the next several weeks. But the trial in the Senate, if it does not have the president appear, it's going to put these Republican senators in a very vulnerable position. They're comfortable going on TV making the kinds of conspiratorial arguments that you just highlighted. But when it comes to being in the well of the Senate with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, sitting there, it's going to be a lot harder to make those arguments. And they should provide evidence and witnesses. But again, this president does not have a good track record in that area.
A couple of final questions. Is it a problem, in your view, if these votes, certainly in the House, go along totally partisan lines? Does that make it difficult? And in terms of the Senate, do you see anything that might suggest to you that any significant number of Republican senators might flip?
Well, it's a real problem that the Republican Party right now, in a sense, sees no evil, hears no evil, and is messaging talking points that the Kremlin has written for them. And that's the real danger to American democracies, that we don't have, like we did in the early 70s, two functioning political parties that are willing to look at facts objectively and at least agree that there are facts. For example, the FBI director yesterday made a statement about an Inspector General report that the president said was not what the FBI director was claiming, which is false. So this is a real crisis, and Senate Republicans are going to have to be the ones to either do their duty as the Senate is prescribed and temper the passions of the House, which is how the founders wanted it, or they're going to fall in line, and we're going to have a real one-party system right now focusing on facts.
Just a final answer in 10 seconds, if you would. For the public, are they tuned into this or tuned out?
I think they tune in episodically with our media cycle, but certainly the news of the day, they're tuned in, and Americans don't like to see our Constitution subverted in the way that it has been.
Joel Rubin, thanks for joining us here on today's programme. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.